instead of just seeing this world as a place of suffering, like this is actually a very beautiful place here. There's things just are, and my expectations and the connotations and the meanings I give to these things are modifiable. And something that I might have learned to be bad doesn't necessarily have to be bad. That's just the connotation of the meaning I give to it. And so, rather, the idea of knowledge and understanding reality as it is, which comes with an acceptance of accepting what it is per se, uh, provides a sense of peace, relief, and actual again, happiness, but not just like temporary happiness, but a sense of bliss. Like, oh yeah, everything is exactly perfect, and I have nothing. Everything is deserving of my gratitude in this life. And these are the types of concepts that I was learning from this ancient practice. And again, it took me from a place of like, oh, this place sucks. This is hard. Why even be here? What the heck am I doing here? Etc. To a place of, wait, I'm here to serve. I'm here to contribute. Taking is what causes suffering. The idea of I'm here to take. Everything's for me. That's when my mind starts to sound like a little baby going, wah, I don't want to do this.
This is Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, with Whitney and Jenkins.
Hello and welcome to the 72nd episode of Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, where I bring on guests and we talk about the inner authentic voice and the challenges and the rewards that come from following it. This week, I have with me Madhuri, Pura, and Dasa. With a burning desire to dedicate his life to living and sharing spiritual wisdom, he became a monk on his 18th birthday. And for 5 years, he lived in various monasteries across the United States and India, and he studied under world-renowned teachers, intermittently traveling the world. When he graduated from the monastery, he was eager to integrate himself back into the world and to share all of the wisdom that he learned to help people through his holistic health and business lifestyle coaching. He's trained hundreds of health and wellness professionals, coaches, and influencers in ancient sciences, and he has helped them create 6- and 7-figure online businesses. He has lived and trained for half a decade as a monk in the Bhakti Yoga tradition, and his mission is to help his clients thrive physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. I really enjoyed this conversation with Madhuri, and I think that his perspective on his experiences are going to bring a lot of insights and little nuggets of wisdom to you as you listen. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Madhuri.
Oh, again, the only hope is that if we can share something that at least one person goes, wow, life's a little easier now, then I consider it a full success.
Yeah, totally. So I see you have lots of instruments on your wall.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Better for worse, I play most of them as well. Yeah, I saw that you're a musician as well. Is that true?
I am,
Very
yeah.
cool.
I'm in Nashville. So where are you? Where are you currently?
Yeah, of course you're a musician. You're in Nashville. That's great. It's been a while since I've been back there. I'm in Southern California on the other side of the country, I'm going to say. Yeah, that's
Okay.
great. What I think I saw, so just so you know, what we'll typically do is Owen, my assistant, will go through a lot of podcasts, pick the few that he thinks I'll be interested in, and even of those I'll be like, yeah, this was it's specifically the fact of authenticity and just like rawness, realness that you present. I was like, yeah, let's go here.
Yeah. I'll have a lot
Awesome.
of creative tenets to myself. But I'm getting my PhD right now in psychology, focusing on creative people. So
Wow.
that's where I am coming from
Which
and my
no
perspective.
wonder we're interested in chatting with each other. Yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
I'm impressed to hear that and inspired that it's nice to have both sides. It's like the creative, explorative, as well as I mean, still inevitably creatively exploring the mind, but seeing more the processes, logistical side of the mind as well. Anyway, great.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So one of the first things that I like to ask my guests, because we're talking about the inner authentic voice, and it seems like you're on sort of a path of guiding people to sort of connect with that and align with that inner part of themselves. And
Absolutely.
so in order to be able to do that, you had to experience a lot of things yourself. And so when is the first time that you can remember that you realized that you did have this inner authentic voice inside of
Hmm.
yourself that you were able to recognize and follow?
Interestingly enough, I can remember being very young and having what I would consider to be like a dialogue with myself, which provided me this idea that there was like a real me, and then there's a witness of like say my like I could perceive my mind. It's like I remember having a thought and thinking, wait, I can change that thought, which means I'm not my thoughts. Anyway, it was quite meta until later, having studied philosophy, having a better grasp on it. But there's this idea, even I don't know how to give you an exact age, but it would be something around maybe 8, 9, something like that.
Okay.
I just remember thinking, like almost being overwhelmed, like, wait, there's a real me, and then there's like my mind that's different because I can observe my mind, but then there's something, the real me observing that mind. In other words, that most real, authentic version of myself. And then from there, I would say it was just inevitably, as I gained vernacular to describe the experience,
Mhm.
that's when it became more
Yeah.
conscious.
So do you remember what you were doing at that time that you were able to sort of separate those two things?
I do. I was such a loner growing up, and so I was an action figure Lego kind of guy and kind of kid. And so I would just most day I would come home from school and just spend the whole day building, creating things, action figures, little soldiers, like any other,
Mhm.
young child would. And I just remember sitting there and being in my room. I remember exactly where I was and having this thought where it was just very confusing. I was like, wait a second. I am observing something, but like I know I'm not that. Again, I didn't have the exact terms, but there was an experience like there's something to, and then even later for having the same experience with the body, like, wait, the body's changing, but I'm not the body. Like
Mhm.
I'm observing the body that's changing, but I'm not changing. The real me, the self, soul, unit of consciousness, whatever terminology we might give, that also happened sometime after. But I very much remember playing.
Yeah, there's something to, I feel like there's something to that play and imagination and that like creative part of being a kid where you can take that storytelling element and sort of observe it like inside and outside of it. Because I feel like I used to do the same thing as a kid. I would act out scenes from my favorite movies in my backyard and like try to
Totally.
like observe like my mindset compared to my emotional intelligence during that time. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. It was, of course, fuzzy nonetheless, but there's
Yeah.
some recollection there. Yeah.
So, as far as like the environment that you grew up in, what was that like for you? Were you supported to explore these different avenues, or was there something very strict put upon you?
Yeah, definitely the opposite of strict. One thing I'm very grateful for my parents about is they never really pushed me to do anything, or they at least never mandated anything. They always gave me options and then gave me a lot of logic behind why to take the options. So an example might be, as a musician, I wanted to learn trumpet. And, my parents were like, yeah, learning music's helpful because it's like learning another language. And the more you learn other languages or music, the more your mind's going to be expanded, the more you're going to be able to have control of mind. And I thought, oh, that makes sense. It'd be kind of cool to play the trumpet. So like that, there was never this idea, you have to go learn trumpet. It was more or less, hey, these are the benefits of playing trumpet. If you want, let me know. And so arguably they might have been too hands off. And specifically on my 18th birthday, when I became a monk, I at first felt like a little resentment. I was like, Mom and Dad, why did you shelter me and take such good care of me? I never even did my laundry. You guys did so much for me. And why? I want more autonomy. Of course, later I matured enough to realize, wow, what a thing to be grateful for, what my parents had done. But there was definitely this idea that they really took care of everything, and arguably so much on the side that I didn't really get familiar with discipline until I decided to become a celibate monk for 5 years. But
Okay.
that alluded to a lot of exploration and especially a lot of time in isolation. Knowing me now, people don't believe me that I was very introverted and didn't really like have friends so much. I was just very much in my own little world until I was 14, 15, whatever the case might be. Um, and so being home a lot, there was just this idea of like, yeah, have fun, explore, playing with again Legos or toys all day, every day, practically speaking.
Yeah. So, what led you? I suppose okay, you mentioned being a monk. So, what led you to that moment in your life where you had all of these realizations about your lack of autonomy?
Yeah, there's this beautiful word called suffering, where I,
Mm.
suffering is obviously relative. Everyone suffers to a certain degree, and it's one's suffering is not inherently better or worse than others, right? Because suffering is suffering. And so, despite being blessed and having, there's always food on the table, there was always a roof over my head, and all the necessities were being covered. There was so much challenge that I was going through. And I grew up with being diagnosed as ADHD. It was ADD, then it was ADHD, and then it was anxiety. And then, it was just added a long list of problems that I had.
Mhm.
And so there was just so much I was struggling with, so many challenges I was going through that I just thought this better. Why go in a direction that is going to lead me to like make money doing something I really want to do, to live in a box I don't really want to live in,
Mhm.
etc. And I thought this doesn't make sense. So I turned to philosophy and theology around 16 or so, just to try to see like what exactly am I? What is my purpose per se? What am I actually supposed to be doing? What honestly, it was like, why even find purpose? And then what is my purpose, etc.
Mhm.
And then I read one book called the Bhagavad Gita when I was 16, which completely changed the trajectory of my life. It opened my mind to a access of knowledge that I just didn't even know existed. Questions that I didn't even know I had were starting to be answered through these literatures that were thousands of years old. They were written thousands
Mhm.
of years ago, and they said they're predated even before they're written. So these ideas that have been around for so long, ancient texts that were still relevant in my life. That's what mm, inspired me to move in a direction where I actually wanted to understand myself. What is the world around me? What is nature, divinity, nature of consciousness? What am I supposed to be doing in this world, etc. And then I wanted to become a monk when I was 17, but they wouldn't let me because I was a minor. So I on my 18th birthday itself is when I moved into the monastery.
Excellent. Where was that?
The My parents were living in Delaware, tiny little state in the middle of
Mhm.
most people never heard of it, tiny little state. And so the closest monastery that I found was in Philadelphia. So the first night it was in Philadelphia, but that was just me in transit to go to this beautiful ashram up in Montreal, Canada. And I was there for about 2 months. And then we all ultimately got, you could say, silly word, but like stationed. In other words, like according to my nature and my services, the place that I could serve the most was actually in Southern California, which funny enough is where I grew up as for the first couple of years of my life. Anyway, so I went back to San Diego and I lived there
Interesting.
for 6 months.
Okay, so for me and the listeners, as far as like what it's like to pursue like becoming a monk and going to a monastery, and I'm sure there's also like different philosophies within different sects of these things. What was it that you were involved in?
Absolutely. So the tradition is called Bhakti Yoga. So usually when we say yoga, there's this idea that it's a like physical stress gymnastics part, which I'm a fan of. We still practice the physical asana or yoga practice, but this is more metaphysical, and yoga means controlling the mind. It literally means connecting. We have the same word in English, yoke, to link or to connect, which comes from the Sanskrit yuk, which is where the word yoga actually comes from, because Sanskrit Latin comes from Sanskrit, and English comes from Germanic and Latin languages. Anyway, and so yoga literally means to unite or to link, to yoke per se. And the idea of bhakti means love and devotion. And so the idea is to link to divinity in a mood of service through loving devotion. And so that's the lineage. And it's not exactly a religious practice. Whereas sometimes we think a monk, it's like, okay, you're a Buddhist monk or a Franciscan monk. And I have friends who are all the above and different other traditions. But the idea of being a Bhakti Yoga monk is it's super. It transcends the idea of temporary designations, be it whether you're whatever gender, whatever race, whatever ethnicity, whatever religion, whatever faith, whatever you fill in the blank. Uh, the idea is one can add a bhakti yoga or a personal loving connection with divinity on top of that, no matter what the temporary material designation is. And so that's the tradition that I went in for various reasons. That's what inspired me. The number one reason being they could answer all my questions, which I was frustrated with. A lot of places I would go, I'd ask a lot of questions and I'd be met with two responses. One was, you ask too many questions, or just have faith. And I was like, I'll have faith, but give me an answer also. And then they were like, no, don't just have faith. You should understand and have faith. And they could actually answer my questions. So that's
Yeah,
what inclined me in that direction.
wild. Okay, so you were 17 when you felt like you wanted to commit to this. Can you
Yeah.
describe what it was inside of you that like was this drive of like going towards that direction? Can you describe that feeling, or do you
Yeah.
even have a word for what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say it was a combination of the interest of knowledge, because there was this idea, even though I might not have consciously thought of knowledge as power, there was this concept that I knew that the more I know and the more I learned, the more I realized how little I actually knew about this world and about myself. And so I was just very curious, and I had this deep desire for knowledge. Like, how can I learn what's out there? How can I learn what's available so that I can actually choose, as opposed to just being like thrusted through society into making decisions almost on autopilot? Like, how can I have enough data to actually make conscious decisions in my life? So that was what I was moving towards. But then that was the carrot. But then the stick behind me was just the suffering that comes from living in this material world without purpose. The idea that it's like, what's the use of all this anyway? That life's hard. Even, and again, even with having loving parents and a loving family and having, we never went with per se, but we also never went without. But like, still the necessities were there, and there's nothing but gratitude still to this day. Nothing but gratitude for everything that came in my life, and still things are so hard. Still things are so challenging and miserable. And so the idea is trying to kind of run away from suffering while simultaneously running towards knowledge. That's what really inclined me in this direction towards studying philosophy and theology.
Yes. So what was it like when you first arrived?
Different. Well, fortunately, because I had some months to prepare, because again, when I was 17, I wanted to. What they did is they actually said, okay, this is what the mornings look like. Practice at home. So I was going to college at the time. I graduated high school at 16, not because I was so smart, but I want to get the heck out of that place. I was like, this is not for me. So
Mhm.
I just figured out how to graduate early, got done with that, and started going to college. And so before my college day, my school day would start, we would wake up around like 4:30 in the morning, because that's the time that they wake up.
Mhm.
We would wake up in the monastery, and we do a series of different meditations. Typically, it's meditation together, and then individual meditation, and then study. That's what the mornings look like, from wake up about 3:34 until about 8, 9. And so I would start doing that, and then around 8, leave for my school day of college. And so I had some preparation. So when I moved in, I was able to make it easier of a transition. I wouldn't call it easy per se, waking up at 3:30.
Right.
It's a lot easier when you're with a bunch of others that are doing it. That's for sure.
So when you say in meditation, can you describe what techniques you were using?
Yes. How long do you have? No. So we'll kind of give an overarching idea. And so the ancient yoga literatures teach that there's many meditations beneficial, but there's one that's the most capturing for the mind. It's called mantra meditation. Man means mind in Sanskrit. Tra means to deliver, to free. And so there's ancient sound vibrations which you chant out loud, in which case it captures the auditory sense. Because a lot of meditations out there are, there's this idea of just shutting down the mind, but the mind's active by nature. So it's actually it can be very frustrating, which is why most people quit. And they think, I can't meditate. When people tell me that, I say, you just haven't found the right meditation yet. So mantra meditation is, for many thousands of years, has been considered the highest. And so we would do a lot of that because, again, you're using all your senses to get involved by chanting these mantras that capture the mind. And so around 4:30, when we would start all together, we would start by a type of musical meditation, actually together with very simple, beautiful instruments and some percussion, just to kind of uh, get the mind into it, if you will. And then we'll do that for about 40 minutes all together. And then we'll break into about 2 hours of individual meditations called japa. Japa, an easy way to remember it is you use your jaw and your paw, which means you use your jaw to chant mantras, and then you use your paw, your hand, to chant on beads to count. Just like, to become good at anything, we got to have some data, some numbers behind it. So we would dedicate about 2 hours to chanting on these malas,
Mhm.
different mantras, individually, privately, and then we would spend some time studying the ancient Vedic texts, or you could say like the ancient yoga literatures about understanding the mind and the psyche and the purpose of life, etc.
Okay. So at what point do you feel like the integration of all of this was noticeable within you and you could understand the effects that it was having on your life?
So the reason I actually went in this direction is because I had tried a lot of stuff with the hopes like one day I'll feel something. But the practice of bhakti, the reason it kind of caught my heart. And to be honest, I was maybe more resistant to this path than some of the others because it was less familiar or less, it was unusual for me. And so I kind of resisted it more than the other ones. But what happened was it was instantaneous actually. When I would do these meditations and when I would read these literatures, it was as if like epiphanies were constantly it was like my mind was just constantly being blown by the knowledge I was studying and then doing the practices. It was like I could feel it. I could viscerally in my body just feel what to speak of my central nervous system decompressing and you know just stepping outside of that fight or flight sympathetic response to a place where I actually felt like, oh, I'm okay. Wait, I'm okay, which that was not a very common situation in my life growing up. Um, I finally felt a sense of peace, but even more than that, there was like a happiness, and it wasn't like a yeah, this makes me happy, this makes me sad. There was a sense of like like I found something, and the way I describe it is it's like feeling like you're in a dark cave and there's no lights, you can't kind of see anything, but then just like all it takes is like a pinprick of light to come through, just one beam that comes through to give enough faith that oh, there is light out there. It's like, oh, wait a second. Okay, I seen a little light. Like I can put the beam on my arm. I can see it coming through. So and that's probably the closest way I can experience this feeling of like, oh, there is something. Like there are things for me. I'm not a lost cause. I'm not a this life isn't just meant for suffering. There's so much more available that I just don't even know of yet. And that was the experience. It was instantaneous. And after 14 years, whatever, 13 years of practicing or so, 12, 13, something like that. I can say that it's just consistently gotten better, with the exception of when I just don't give it my proper attention, of course. But as long as I do my due diligence, it's just been consistently more and more noticeable in my life.
Yeah. So that light that you were describing, what is there a word that you have for that, or a way of sort of summarizing your
Yeah.
belief structure and just like of everything that you're studying and sharing with the world?
Yeah, there's a Sanskrit word I like that describes this well called vidya. Vidya literally means light, but it also means knowledge. The term is used in the same. Similarly, the opposite of it, avidya, without light or without knowledge, or you could say darkness or ignorance. The idea of vidya means to not only illuminate something, but illuminating the mind with an understanding of self. And so, probably the best way to encapsulate it is this concept of illumination, in meaning that there's parts of myself that I just didn't even know existed. There's aspects of reality that I definitely didn't know existed in terms of just like, instead of just seeing this world as a place of suffering, like this is actually a very beautiful place here. There's things just are, and my expectations and the connotations and the meanings I give to these things are modifiable. And something that I might have learned to be bad doesn't necessarily have to be bad. That's just the connotation of the meaning I give to it. And so, rather, the idea of knowledge and understanding reality as it is, which comes with an acceptance of accepting what it is per se, uh, provides a sense of peace, relief, and actual again, happiness, but not just like temporary happiness, but a sense of bliss. It's like, oh yeah, everything is exactly perfect, and I have nothing. Everything is deserving of my gratitude in this life. And these are the types of concepts that I was learning from this ancient practice. And again, it took me from a place of like, oh, this place sucks. This is hard. Why even be here? What the heck am I doing here? Etc. To a place of, wait, I'm here to serve. I'm here to contribute. Taking is what causes suffering. The idea of I'm here to take. Everything's for me. That's when my mind starts to sound like a little baby and go, wah, I don't want to do this. So rather, I'm here to serve. I'm here to contribute. I'm here to just do whatever I can to improve the quality of lives of other individuals. And and what to speak of the concept of the nature of self? The ancient yoga literatures teach that this isn't YOLO. There's not just one life, but actually the self, the unit of consciousness is eternal. And it's not like you just randomly come into being for a few months, years, decades, maybe a century, and then you go into nothingness, which is just doesn't make much sense because something can't come from nothing, grammatically speaking. But rather, it's like the soul's eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge. And to the extent that we uncover that true dormant consciousness within, we are going to feel a sense of purpose, connection, happiness, etc.
And how would you yourself define consciousness?
Yeah. So the I love this question because in science world we call this the problem of consciousness. It's a very difficult. Well, I think that would we'll be talking about will hopefully make it a little less difficult, but at least in the modern world, this idea of like, um, can you prove consciousness? What exactly is consciousness? What I always like to do in answering these types of questions, which are very meta, which there's no, say, there's no direct perception like that you can see with your eyes of, say, a consciousness or a soul or a self or whatever the case
Mhm.
might be.
Yeah.
So what I always like to do is understanding first principle logic, or really the idea is like, what do I absolutely know about this? Like, let's start with what we can all agree as an axiom and then move from there. And so the axiom that uh, we can all experience in our life is that I think, therefore I am, as Nietzsche said. There's this idea of the fact that I can even contemplate if I'm consciousness is an indication of itself that I am a conscious being, which means I have thoughts, I have free will to actually explore ideas and conceptions internally, what does be externally with my body, um, to express the deeper sense of self. And what I like to do is break things down into three elements, and that is there's the self, or the consciousness, the real you. There's the mind, which you can witness outside of you. Again, the mind changes, and therefore you can see the mind, you could change it. It's something separate. And then there's the body, which is constantly changing, even though the real you, the self, isn't changing. So a phrase I often repeat to myself and with many students is, I'm not my body, I'm not my mind, I'm something divine. There's this idea that I know I'm not my body and I know I'm not my mind because they're changing, but I can witness them. So the unit of consciousness is that self, that you, that experience of reality that is witnessing the mind and the body, as well as all other nature and other living entities outside of your mind and your body, that can experience and perceive things going on in perpetual, what we call perpetual presence, as opposed to this idea of time that there's a future, there's a past. It's like the unit of consciousness only perceives the now, which is why you can never go to the past. You can remember the past. You can't go to the future. You can try to project or speculate the future, but it's a consistent experience of the now and the presence that witnesses the mind and the body. More I can share, but that's the
Yeah.
bite-sized version.
So, so going and becoming a monk and surrounding yourself in this environment, and like you're immersed in it and you're around people who are supporting you and guiding you and teaching you. And then applying all these things and existing in the world that we are living in, like how do you
I integrate.
yeah, how do you
I like manage.
how does one take this philosophy and insert themselves into society and maintain that?
Yeah, well, that's the purpose of becoming a student monk for some years, because 99% of monks, we will go in for some time and then we will become normal people again,
Mhm.
hence the hair and the non-robes, etc. The whole idea is one goes through a process of trying to integrate the practices deeply and learn the knowledge so that when you graduate the monastery, you can share this and give this out to others. So like that's the whole, you can say, purpose of being a student monk. There are we call the one percenters who go for gold. They take a lifelong vow of celibacy,
Mhm.
but it's very rare, and it's not so common. So most of us, the whole time as monks, we're learning again how to integrate it in our lives so that when we graduate, we can integrate it into others' lives. And really, what that looks like, if I were to consolidate into a sentence or an idea, would be how to live our life in a mood of service, connected to our unique purpose in a way that improves my quality of life as well as others' qualities of life beyond just this very life. So I'll say that maybe one more time just to break it down. The idea is, with my unique psychophysical nature, the gifts that I have that are unlike any other living entity in the world, every single person, unit of consciousness, has unique gifts unlike any other living entity ever that will ever exist. How do I take that unique gift, these gifts that I have, and then use them in such a way as to serve others so that not only do I improve my quality of life, but I improve their quality of life? And not just limited to this life, but how do I contribute in a way that will hopefully help even beyond this one temporary life that we're only in? We're only in this body for, again, a few days, months, maybe years, maybe a couple of decades, maybe a century. A few people, a little over a century. But how do we go even just beyond these blip of a life per se?
Yeah, and would you say that that is what a purpose is all those elements that you just like put together and
I like that
described.
idea. I haven't exactly thought like put that thought together that
Mm.
that's the purpose, but I think that as eloquently as you just expressed it, I think that's a really fair way to surmise the idea of purpose. I would say like the deepest purpose, like everyone's deepest purpose is of serving and contributing according to our unique natures. I think that's a very beautiful definition.
Right, because I feel like initially like it's who am I, why am I here, like what am I doing? It goes from who am I to why am I here, and then that goes into our purpose.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, interesting. So when did you feel that you had learned enough that you were able to teach others?
Yeah. So is this something that usually your teachers will kind of temper per se? It's not so much like I'm ready. It's more or less, for me, it was about a half a decade that I was living as a monk, and even about 4 years in or so, it got to the point where it was like, hey, like, what are you thinking? And I was like, yeah, probably like I could see myself, and even just I was at an age where I was like, I was just noting biologically, I was like, okay, it's not always easy to be a celibate monk, you know, and you're going very much against nature in that way, and so I noticed that it was my mind was starting to pull me in a direction to of curiosity of this world, and like, yeah, it would be nice to start a family and all that jazz. And so after about 5 years or so, that's when my teachers were like, yeah, it's time, and that's where we have a very beautiful ceremony to kind of take what we've learned and make that transition per se into normal people life. And then we get a lot of support. It's not like good luck, have fun, but we get a lot of support in making that transition back into the real world, if that's what you'd like to call it. And so for me, the primary indicator really was the desire to move beyond that, like to actually start to live in this world. Not necessarily. I mean, I didn't mind sleeping on the ground, honestly. It's like a spiritual frat house when you're with the other monks. It's like there really is a camaraderie ship unlike anything. Quite militant too. Not so brash, but wake up this time, you meditate this time, and then you
Yeah.
clean at this time, and then you go serve at this time. And so there's a real sense of like enjoyment that comes. But I was like, yeah, it might be nice. It might be nice to like start to have like real life amenities and figure out how to actually help people more than what I was capable of just as being a monk.
Right, exactly. And so how did you reintegrate yourself into this other
Yeah,
world or life?
I
Or...
yeah, I started by teaching two things that I had studied very deeply as a monk. One was like the mindset mindfulness meditation, that whole area of just like understanding the mind and the psyche well enough that you can present information in a way that's going to help the people that you're working with to ultimately be able to control their mind. And then the other aspect was I studied what's called the Ayurveda, an ancient yoga science of holistic health. And so I studied that for years as a monk. And so as soon as I graduated, I started facilitating different sessions, either group and individual around that, or really all around the world, and made about $15,000 a year for the first year and then 18,000 the next. So was not supporting myself financially by any which way or shape. And then after about 2 years of really suffering in terms of like helping others, but not taking care of myself. All that travel and not being able to like actually afford quality food or whatever the case
Mhm,
might be.
mhm.
And I got help, don't get me wrong, but it was definitely not the most comfortable quality of life. I'll say that for sure. And that's when I realized I needed to figure out I got to learn money. I got to learn how to make a living in this world. And that's when I started going to education around how to actually like finance and business and like, how do I actually make a living doing what I love? And then from there, we just, created an actual business entity and then grew that and then double that and then kept helping more people. And then from there, it just kept expanding and expanding. And, but the first 2 years were adorable, as I would like to say.
So so finance it like money and spiritual concepts are something that I feel like a lot of people maybe struggle with connecting.
Mm.
So
Yep.
what is your like core like philosophy that got you to that point?
Yes. So this is something I had to learn. Sometimes I'll say that it was more uncomfortable for me to rewire my brain around money and resources than it was probably to become a monk for years. It was just such a paradigm shift because I grew up again having the necessities there, but it was like my parents every month was like bill to bill, paycheck to paycheck, and then also like always dipping under and just like kind of come. So I never had a real job. I was a lifeguard. I made like a few dollars an hour, but I never in my life had more than say $200-300 in my account. And so I had no concept of money till I was in my early 20s. And so what I had to learn was, I would say it's based off this one principle that money is not good or bad. It just is a resource. Just like a knife isn't good or bad. A knife can be used to by a surgeon to perform surgery to save a life. It can also be used to stab someone, to kill someone. So the knife isn't good or bad. It's the intention and how one uses it. Same thing with money is money amplifies what's happening in someone's mind. So somebody with a good mind, I don't actually believe in good or bad per se of a mind, but somebody with good intentions, if you want to qualify that, can do great things with money. Somebody with bad intentions will do bad things with money. So understand this idea that money is not inherently good or bad. It just is. And what you do with it is what provides the result of that money or the outcome of that money. First, making that understanding, and then from there, realizing that I can do what I want and make a living doing it, which there's this idea of, oh, I'm a healer. Healers are supposed to suffer. We don't make money. We just serve. But actually having a paradigm shift that I can be of service, and the way to be of more service is to make sure I can take care of myself, because a drowning lifeguard can't save any, but a strong lifeguard can save many. In the same way as if I take care of myself and I'm nourished and I have all my needs and some met, then I'll actually be able to help people more. And so these two paradigm shifts were the foundation for me to then channel my ambition and my charisma to actually go do what I love and figure out how to charge in such a way that people provide enough value that people want to give me money, as opposed to wanting money from them. You provide so much value, so much service that before you know, people are like, "Could I give you a little something?" It's like, all right. And then how to make that a sustainable business structure.
Yeah, absolutely. This is really interesting because I feel like there's a lot of parallels with my work and what I do, like with artists and creatives, and like the value of that art and creative, and like the connection to money and survival and being able to create and heal through art as well. There's a lot of very like similarities going on.
Totally.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with especially with the type of work that you do too, it's like it's so needed in this world, this type of work, because in Western culture specifically, there's this concept that it's like, yeah, I mean, even the struggling artist or the starving artists, as they say.
Mhm.
And and so it's so needed for those like you, just empowering others to really have a conception of self-worth and self-value so that they can, well, get that
Right.
worth, get that value.
Yeah, we
And
don't have to suffer. Like we can have a holistic like contentment to our lives and still,
yeah.
you
And
know.
it's almost essential, because like if we look at when we talk about high powers, the way I always like to think is, again, more I try to be as objective as I can. And there's powers higher than us. And if no one believes me, just go out, spend some time in the sun. You'll see really quickly, okay, there's powers greater than me. And so if we know that there's a hierarchy in our experience of powers, we can understand that there's going to be a highest of powers. There's a hierarchy. Therefore, when we're talking about that highest of powers, if we try to conceive of what could be the highest of powers, what would that look like, we are led to a result of what I call a triple OG. And really what that means is uh, an a source, a cognitive source, which really means a person, an entity that is all powerful, means can control everything, but is all loving, omnibenevolent. There's a sense of love, because as we all experience, love is more important than anything in this world, which is why somebody give you $1 zillion, but say you can't ever see any other living entity, no pet, no human, no anything for the rest of life. No one takes that bet. Why? Because love is always the priority. So we have an all powerful entity that's also all loving, that also is all knowing, which means there is a benefactor that knows exactly what you need, can give it to you, and wants to give it to you at all times, and therefore does not enjoy our suffering. And so the idea is that not only do you not have to suffer, but there's no need. And we have all divine resources to back us in not having to suffer and actually getting everything we want. But we have free will, and an all powerful, all loving source would never inflict on that, because if there's force, there's no love. Love has to come from a sense of free will, a sense of desire. So because we have free will, a divine source will never impede on our free will in such a way as that we then have to make decisions. And so our destiny is in our hands. All I have to do is make the decision, and then I'll have unlimited support behind me in that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I'm trying to be mindful of our time because I don't want to keep you too long. So, but I am curious about this because I feel like in our society at this moment, spirituality has become kind of like a trendy thing. And also, there's a big integration happening right now of psychedelics and the whole realm of mind expansion and people connecting to finding awareness and consciousness through those routes too. And so I'm curious, as your opinion as you've gone and the work that can get you to these places, like, and without those substances,
That naturally, organically. Yeah.
naturally, yeah. Like, what is your opinion on these avenues, and have you experienced them? Yeah.
Well, I'll say right off the bat, I'm a big fan of medicine, especially when I don't feel well. I'm an even bigger fan. Typically, I'm a fan, but even bigger fan when I'm sick or when I'm experiencing something. So I think right off the bat that it's important to acknowledge that things again aren't inherently good or bad. It's not like this thing is good or bad. It's how it's used. And so there's most things in this world, especially things that are naturally occurring, are there for a purpose, and therefore there's a time and place for everything. So I don't believe that it's like things are psychedelics are bad or whatever the case might be. And as long as one is not abusing these gifts of life, which I do find to be more present than not, where it's like, ooh, this is a medicine. Let me just numb myself with it on a consistent basis so I don't have to deal with reality. That's obviously a problem. That where you become a dependent on it, where it becomes an addiction, where it has control over you as opposed to you having control over that. That's an issue that we want to work with and address. Um, but when it's dealt with through an expert in a medicinal way, I don't have any challenges to that idea. And I think that it could be very beneficial. And I've seen it. I've seen it. I mean, even now there's clinical trials behind the efficacy and the benefits of certain types of natural substances in the world, from psilocybin to ketamine, to, whatever the case might be. Obviously, some of these are extracted from their original chemical composition, but still the effect is similar. What I do, that being said, what I like to share and preach is this idea that aside from medicine, using these things medicinals, I'm a big fan of going to these places, getting these experiences, making internal transformations without having to depend on things outside. So again, using them medicinally is one thing, but you don't take medicine every day, right? You don't take medicine every week. You take it on an as needed basis through expert facilitation. Rather than unnecessarily turning to these things, I'm a big fan of using your mind, which is the only thing we can actually control in our life. Like, what can we control in this world except for our mind? First, going inward and making as much modification and healing as we can through our mind first, which doesn't mean by yourself. Always get help. We're all dependent on help. We're standing on the shoulders of giants here to accomplish anything great in this world. But focusing on what you have control within your own means before depending on something external. Always starting there, because people really tend to not give themselves as much credit as they deserve in terms of what their capacity and power is to make transformation in their own life.
Yeah, absolutely. What are the Ayurvedic and yogic, like, sort of philosophies about these things? Because Ayurveda, it uses a lot of food as medicine,
Yep.
and some of these substances are natural occurring things. So what is that? Like, what is the mindset about those things from that
Yeah.
perspective?
Well, the mindset I just shared it's borrowed. It doesn't belong to me because it's borrowed from the yoga.
Yeah.
It's Veda. This Sanskrit term Veda means knowledge, and so the ancient Vedas, which interestingly enough are the oldest written literatures we know of in the world, and they teach everything from what we're talking about to, I mean, everything from Dhanur Veda to like the study of martial arts to anyway, anything you think of practically, there's some science behind it. And so when it comes to Ayurveda, the quality of life and healing and medicine is involved. And I mean, everything from surgery is involved. And so there's, again, not this idea of good or bad, but it's every circumstance needs to be met in an individual way according to one's unique composition, physical composition and constitution, and the way one's mind is developed, etc. it's not a one size fits all, but everything should be met with expert care and attention, not one size fits all per se. And there's this idea that anything that can be done with the mind, better to start with the mind. And then if it gets to be too much, which shouldn't just be too much for you, again, through expert guidance, if it's just like something that should be dealt with on a more nuanced approach, then at that point, we want to implement things that are, say, psychoactive, things that are actually going to change the mind. But most challenges in life can be dealt with by your eating and sleeping, like by what's in your control, just through your diet and your lifestyle. 90% of what most people are experiencing can be moved through or healed or improved simply by diet and lifestyle exclusively. And then a little other things obviously when the body goes out of balance, of course, still starting with diet and lifestyle, but of course, medicine's helpful, or dealing with certain types of traumas or life experiences. Of course, that's when we want to turn to helpers, supplements per se.
Yeah. 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 Excellent. So if people would like to work with you or follow your work, like where could we guide them?
Yeah, I give all of my resources for free. So all of our course content, we just make it available so that no one has an excuse to heal or to grow. And so on all platforms, you can find me at madhu.life. That's madhu.life. Madhu.life. That's from social media and Instagram to TikTok to wherever you want to find me. That's our website, is madhu.life. If you send me a message there, and what I'll do is not only will I give you access to all of our courses, which is everything from our monk mindset method, which means teach you how to actually be in control of your mind so it doesn't control you, to our Ayurveda and health courses, which you could learn how to improve your quality of health naturally, to our conscious closing systems, which means how to grow your business and, in a way that's not slimy or salesy, but make enough that you're supported and get enough clients that they're supported. We teach all this stuff for free. And I don't just want to give you access to that, but someone who's coming through this podcast, if you send me the word, let's do authentic. I
Okay.
think that's
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
be a good one.
Yeah. That's a
If
good
somebody,
word.
yeah, I love it because of what you're sharing. What I'd like to do is gift people not just our free access, but we have some courses we use with our clients as well that I'd like to just gift anyone who's coming
Oh,
through this podcast as a way of just sharing with my gratitude for you keeping a podcast like this going, because most people don't know the labor of love it takes to
right.
share in the way that you have been. And so out of my gratitude for you and your listeners, send me the word authentic on any platform. And not only will I get you access to our community, which with more courses you probably know what to do with, and we'll of course help you figure out what to work on. But we also give you a few things that we would typically reserve for our clients. But I'd like to just give that away for free. There's one specific resource I think that would be relevant to your listeners.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
My pleasure. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Is there anything that you feel is on your heart or your mind that you would like to share before we get to the last question?
Yeah, I would like to say that hopelessness, excuse me, is such a hard feeling to sit with. This idea, oh, like there's nothing left for me. What's the purpose? What's the use? These kinds of sense feelings are so overwhelming and debilitating. And what I'd like to share is that for anyone listening, know that with absolute certainty, there's no living entity in this world or even beyond this world that is exactly like you, which means that you have intrinsic value. It means there's no one that is exactly like you, even if you have an identical twin. No one exactly like you, which means that your unique psychophysical nature, with whatever you might have accomplished in your life, even if you feel like you haven't done much of anything, the fact that you still get out of the bed in the morning, the fact that you contribute in whatever way you do is valuable. It's of service. And so if you're ever doubting that, accept that reality that at least, the very least, you're unique and there's nothing else, no one else like you. And therefore, please, please, please access as much gratitude as you have for the current situation you're in, and whatever you can do to provide a little value to someone else, even if that just means one little thing you've learned, from tying your shoe to how to eat to how to cook, whatever it is, to how to watch that TV show. It doesn't matter. Just finding one way to contribute, you will access more happiness in your life than you possibly knew existed, because taking does not give happiness, but contributing, serving, and giving will provide you more happiness than ever. And even if you don't believe me, no problem. Go try it and see if I'm wrong. Money back guarantee for today's
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'd like to share, because know that you have more gifts than you give yourself credit for. And all you have to do is contribute, and you will access more satisfaction in your life than you knew existed.
All right. Fantastic. So I feel like that kind of like goes into the last question that I ask everyone, and that is, if your inner voice had a billboard, what would it say to the world?
Serve. SERVE.
There you go.
It's
Excellent.
just that simple. It's actually just that simple. That's where happiness comes. They did a study on happy people, and new mamas are among the happiest. But that makes no material sense, because baby does nothing for mama. I mean, mamas out there go, how dare you? But you know what I mean. Baby does nothing, mama does everything. How does that bring so much happiness? It's because when we serve, when we nurture and take care of others, that's where real happiness comes from. Billboard says, serve.
I like it. Yeah, excellent. We'll get t-shirts made.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom, and coming on and sharing everything with our listeners. It's fantastic.
Grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you so much for joining me this week. If you're listening and you like what you hear, please consider subscribing and rating this podcast, as it really helps get this podcast out to other people who might be interested in hearing it but don't know about it yet. And also, if you'd like to contact me or reach me, you can reach me at unconditioningpodcast@gmail.com or unconditioningpodcast on Instagram. Thank you so much. And until next time, stay tuned in to you.